The front desk of Cedar Hollow smelled of cut cedar and lake water, and the young clerk behind it was smiling so wide it looked like it hurt. "Congratulations on the wedding," she said, clasping her hands. "The honeymoon suite is ready whenever you two are. We put fresh flowers in this morning." Nathan Brooks stood very still. He had a canvas tool bag over one shoulder and sawdust in the creases of his knuckles, and beside him a small girl held the hem of his shirt with 3 fingers. He opened his mouth to fix the mistake, because fixing mistakes was simply what he did. "Actually, we're not," he began. "There's been a mix-up. I'm only here to work on the boat." But the woman standing next to him slid her hand into his and squeezed once, quietly, like a signal passed under a table. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was soft and even. "We're so happy." Nathan turned to look at her. He had met her 3 days earlier. He did not know her last name. He did not know that she had flown in under a reservation with no title attached to it, or that back in a glass tower 200 miles away, a board of directors was preparing to decide whether she was still worth listening to. He only knew that she was looking at the clerk with a kind of desperate calm, as if this small lie were a warm room she did not want to leave. Behind them, near the concierge stand, the resort manager who had called Nathan the hired help not 1 hour before went very, very still. He had come to Cedar Hollow to save a building. He had not planned to save anyone, least of all a stranger who would not let go of his hand. Before you go any further, ask yourself who it is that walks that woman down to the dock at the end of this summer, because some answers you will not see coming. And this is one of them. Stay with this one all the way to the end. 6 weeks earlier, none of these people had ever met. 6 weeks earlier, the boathouse at Cedar Hollow was dying. Nathan saw it the moment his truck rolled down the gravel drive. He saw it the way a doctor sees a limp across a waiting room, all at once and without wanting to. The roofline had begun to sag towards the water. The old timber ribs, cut and raised by hands almost 100 years gone, had gone soft where the lake kept licking at them. Most people looked at the building and saw something charming and finished. Nathan looked at it and saw 100 small surrenders that had not yet added up to the last one. He parked, and a small voice from the passenger seat said, "Is that it? Is that the boathouse?" "That's it, Pop." Poppy Brooks was 6 years old, with her mother's stubborn cowlick and a backpack full of things she considered essential, which today meant 2 plastic horses, a magnifying glass, and a half-eaten granola bar. She pressed her nose to the window. "It's leaning," she said. "It is. Are you going to make it stop leaning?" "I'm going to try." They walked out onto the dock together in the early light, and Nathan crouched and ran his palm along the lowest beam, where the wood had gone dark and spongy. He pressed his thumb in and felt it give, and something in him settled the way it always did when a job finally showed him its real shape. "See how the water tried to take it, Pop?" he said. "We just have to remind it how to stand." Poppy nodded very seriously, then went off to arrange pine cones along the edge of the dock in an order that made sense only to her. A woman in a housekeeping apron came down the path with an armful of folded linens and stopped when she saw them. She was in her early 50s, with kind, tired eyes and a name tag that read Rosa. "You must be the carpenter," she said. "Nathan." He stood and wiped his hand before offering it. "And that's Poppy, my foreman." Rosa laughed, and it was the first real laugh he had heard at Cedar Hollow. "It is good to have someone here who cares about the old bones of this place," she said, lowering her voice. "Most people just want it to look expensive." He would understand what she meant within the hour. The manager found him before he had finished unloading. Julian Frost was a lean, precise man of 45 who wore a pressed suit in a place where no one needed one, and he carried a laminated card the way some men carry a badge. He did not shake Nathan's hand. He looked at the truck, at the tool bag, at Poppy on the dock, and something in his face closed like a till drawer. "You'll use the service path," Frost said, holding out the card. "Not the main lawn. These are the vendor rules. Guests come to Cedar Hollow to get away from," he paused, choosing the word, "labor. They don't want to see the help, or the help's child." Nathan took the card and read it without expression. "She stays with me on jobs," he said. "She's quiet, and she stays out of the way." "She stays out of sight," Frost corrected. "Keep both of you where you belong, and we'll have no trouble." There had been a time, years earlier, when a sentence like that would have landed differently, because there had been a time when people in expensive rooms said Nathan's name with a certain hush. He let the memory pass. He had learned that a man could either spend his energy being insulted or spend it being useful, and only one of those built anything. "Understood," he said, and went back to the water. The work itself asked nothing of him but honesty, which was why he loved it. He spent the first week doing almost nothing that looked like progress. He measured. He mapped the rot with a length of pencil and a careful eye, marking each failing beam with a small chalk cross, learning the way the century-old joinery had been cut so that whatever he put back would speak the same language as what the first builders had raised. Poppy sat cross-legged on the dock with her magnifying glass, appointing herself inspector, and every so often she would announce that a particular board was very bad, or okay, I think, and Nathan would nod as if she had confirmed his own findings. Rosa brought them lunch on the third day because she said no one else was going to, and she stayed to watch him fit a new timber into the frame without a single nail, coaxing it home with a wooden mallet until it seated with a soft final knock. "You don't use screws," she observed. "Not where the old builders didn't," Nathan said. "You honor the hand that came before yours. Otherwise, you're not fixing the thing. You're just covering it." Rosa looked at him for a moment as if she were revising an opinion, and then she smiled and went back up the path. That night, in the small staff cottage they had been given at the edge of the property, he read Poppy a story until her eyes went heavy. When he closed the book, she was quiet for a moment, looking at the ceiling. "Dad," she said, "do you think a mom could live somewhere like this? By a lake?" Nathan sat very still on the edge of the little bed. The question was not new. It arrived every few weeks in a slightly different shape, and it never got easier to hold. "I think a place like this could be somebody's home," he said carefully. "But could a mom live here? Maybe, Pop. Maybe somewhere." He turned off the lamp, and he did not have an answer, and he lay awake for a while, listening to the lake move against the dock like something patient. He had not always been the man in the service path. 2 years before Cedar Hollow, in another spring, Nathan had stood in a hospital corridor holding a phone with a commission on the other end of it. It was the kind of job that made careers permanent. A cathedral roof, 3 years of work, his name carved somewhere quiet in the record of the building. On the other side of the wall, his wife was sleeping the thin sleep of the very ill, and their daughter was 4 years old and did not fully understand yet what was coming. Grace had known him better than he knew himself. When he told her about the offer, she did not tell him to take it or turn it down. She reached for his hand with the little strength she had left and said, "Promise me you won't disappear into work. She's going to need one of us all the way there. Be the one who stays." He had turned the job down the next morning. He never told the men who offered it the real reason. He simply said he was needed at home, which was the truest sentence he had ever spoken. Grace lived one more season. She saw one more summer on the porch of the little house they had rented near the sea. And she watched Poppy learn to run on sand. And she made Nathan promise a second time, near the end, that he would not let the girl grow up thinking her mother had wanted to leave. When she was gone, Nathan discovered that grief did not make him want prestige. It made him want mornings. It made him want to be in the room. The offers kept coming for a while, from people who assumed a widower would want to lose himself in work. And one by one, he turned them down, until they stopped coming, and he found that he did not miss them at all. So he had folded up the part of his life that impressed people, and he took only 1 or 2 jobs a year, and he brought Poppy to every one of them, and he told himself that a smaller life fully lived was not a smaller life at all. At dawn on the dock, weeks into the Cedar Hollow job, Rosa found him working and asked him gently why a man with hands like his took so few jobs. Nathan considered the water for a while before he answered. "I can build almost anything," he said, "but I can't build the years back. I missed some once, and I promised I'd stop. So I did." Rosa did not say anything. She just set a second cup of coffee down beside him and let him keep working, which was its own kind of understanding. Vivian Hart arrived at Cedar Hollow with 1 bag and no title. That was the whole point of the trip. Back home, she was the chief executive of Hart Hospitality, the 3rd generation to run a company her grandmother had started with a single roadside inn. And in 11 days, a board that had grown impatient with her would vote on whether to strip the company for parts. They wanted her to sell off the small, unprofitable, beautiful places, the ones that did not scale, and Cedar Hollow was first on the list. She had come to see it before she was asked to kill it. She had made the reservation in a name no one would recognize, refused the car service, and told herself she just wanted to be nobody for a week. Because of a double booking, the front desk placed her in the cottage next to the one where the carpenter and his daughter were staying, and logged the 2 units together in a note that read, simply, "The couple in the Cedar Cottages." It was the kind of small error that changes everything. Frost, who assumed any woman traveling alone to an expensive lake resort must be someone worth flattering, fell over himself to be charming to her, which she found exhausting in a way she could not name. "Whatever you need, absolutely anything," Frost told her at check-in. "You just ask for me by name." "I need," Vivian said slowly, "to not be asked anything by anyone. Can you arrange that?" That evening she walked down to the water because she could not sleep, and she found a small wooden toy boat drifting a few feet from the dock, and a man in the shallows waiting after it with his trousers rolled up in a resigned expression. On the dock, a little girl watched with her hands pressed to her mouth. Vivian, without quite deciding to, crouched, reached out, and caught the boat before the current took it. "Yours?" she asked, holding it up. "Hers," said the man. He climbed out, dripping. "She built it. I just keep it from sinking." "You built this," Vivian said to the girl, turning it over. It was rough and lovingly made, the little mast slightly crooked. "Dad helped with the sail," Poppy admitted. "It's a very good boat," Vivian said, and meant it. And something in her chest that had been clenched for a long time loosened by a single notch. She had not spoken to a child in years. She had spoken to shareholders and analysts and a personal assistant who scheduled her sleep. And somewhere in all of it, she had forgotten the particular seriousness of a 6-year-old handing you something they had made. Poppy took the boat back, inspected it for water damage, and pronounced it seaworthy. "Are you a guest?" the girl asked. "I suppose I am," Vivian said. "Do you have a job?" Vivian hesitated. It was the simplest question anyone had asked her in a year, and the hardest to answer honestly. "I take care of some old buildings," she said finally, which was closer to the truth than she intended. "So does my dad," Poppy said, satisfied, as if this settled something, and went back to sailing. Nathan, wringing out the cuff of his trousers, caught Vivian's eye over his daughter's head and gave her a small, tired, grateful smile. The smile of a parent to a stranger who has been kind. And Vivian felt it land somewhere she had kept locked for a long time. She stayed on the dock past dark that night, longer than she had stayed anywhere in a year, because for the first time in a long while, leaving felt like the worst of the two options. The mistake became a habit before anyone could stop it. It was Rosa, of all people, who first congratulated them, having heard from the front desk that the couple in the cedar cottages were newlyweds. Then the groundskeeper did. Then the woman who ran the little cafe by the boathouse sent over 2 slices of cake for the happy pair. Each time Nathan started to explain, and each time something got in the way. And by the 3rd day, the whole staff of Cedar Hollow believed a gentle, tidy story that was not true. On the 4th morning it happened in the grand hall, in front of everyone, when the clerk offered them the honeymoon suite, and Vivian took Nathan's hand and thanked her. Afterward, in the corridor, Nathan spoke quietly. "I don't like pretending to be something I'm not," he said. "I've spent 2 years teaching my daughter that we tell the truth, even when it's harder." Vivian looked at him, and for a moment the practiced calm slipped, and he saw how tired she really was. "Neither do I," she said. "That's the strange part. I lie for a living, in a way. I tell rooms full of people what they want to hear. And out here, being the wrong thing to strangers, I feel more like myself than I have in years. Nobody wants anything from the woman in that story. They just wish her well." He did not fully understand it, but he understood being worn down to the grain, and he did not press. What he noticed over those days was that she was different around Poppy than around anyone else. With the staff she was polite and a little guarded, a woman used to being handled. With his daughter she was unguarded and slow, willing to spend 20 minutes debating whether a cloud looked more like a horse or a whale. She sat on the dock in the evenings and let Poppy braid grass into bracelets and did not once check the phone that Nathan knew rang constantly in her pocket. A person could tell a great deal about someone by watching who they became around a child who wanted nothing from them. And what Nathan saw in Vivian, under all the careful stillness, was someone starving for something ordinary. That afternoon, on the porch of her cottage, her phone rang, and the voice on the other end belonged to Gerald Wexler, the board member who had spent a year sharpening himself against her. "Have you signed the divestment yet?" Wexler said, without hello. "I'm still evaluating the property." "There's nothing to evaluate. It loses money. Sentiment doesn't scale, Vivian. Sign it, or the board is going to remember that when it mattered, you couldn't make the hard call. She looked out at the lake, where a man and a small girl were carrying planks down to a leaning building that a spreadsheet said should be torn down. "I'll call you when I've decided," she said, and hung up and did not sign anything. Down at the boathouse, Frost had cornered Nathan again, this time with an impossible deadline and a threat to withhold the final payment, and a last little jab about the child underfoot. "I've moved the unveiling up," Frost said. "It's in 9 days. If the building isn't finished, you don't get paid, and I'll make sure everyone in this business knows you couldn't deliver. And keep the girl out of the main house. I've had a complaint." There had been no complaint. Nathan knew it, and Frost knew he knew it. Nathan absorbed all of it and kept sanding a beam smooth, feeling the grain come up soft and true under his hand, because the beam did not care who anyone thought he was. He had learned that a man who let cruelty set his pace ended up building the other man's building instead of his own. So he set his own pace. He would finish in 9 days, because the work deserved to be finished, not because Frost had threatened him, and there was a quiet, unbreakable difference between those two things that Frost would never understand. That evening he found Poppy sitting on the cottage step, and she asked him why the man in the suit did not like them, and Nathan crouched down to her level the way he always did for the important questions. "Some people decide how much you're worth by how you look on a Tuesday afternoon," he said. "They're usually wrong, and it's usually not worth your time to prove it. You just keep being the person you are and let them catch up or not." Poppy considered this. "I don't think he's going to catch up," she said. "Probably not," Nathan agreed, and she laughed, and that was worth more than the payment. That night, Vivian was being asked to sell the one place she felt human, and Nathan was being asked to prove that he did not matter, and neither of them agreed to do it. The storm came in on the second week's end, fast off the water the way lake storms do. The boathouse roof was half open, the new ribs raised but not yet sheathed, and if the rain got into the fresh joinery, a month of work would swell and split. Nathan was up on the staging with a lamp clipped to his belt before the first real gust hit, wrestling tarps and battening timber, and there was more of it than one man could hold. He did not hear Vivian come down the path. He only felt the ladder steady under a second set of hands and turned to find her there in a borrowed rain jacket, soaked to the skin, Poppy asleep, and safe in a chair inside the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "Go back," he called over the wind. "You'll be soaked." "I'm already soaked," she called back. "Tell me what to hold." So he told her. For 3 hours in the dark they worked the way a good crew works, without wasted words, her hands learning the weight of things, his voice steady over the rain. "Hold this. Not yet. Now. Don't let go until I say." She had run a company of 9,000 people, and she could not remember the last time she had been simply, physically useful to someone, and it was the best she had felt in years. Around 3 in the morning, a gust caught a loose corner of tarp and nearly took Nathan off the staging, and Vivian grabbed a fistful of his jacket and hauled back with everything she had, and for a second they simply held each other there in the rain, hearts going hard, the lake roaring below them. "I've got you," she said. "Go." And he went, and she held, and the corner came down and was lashed tight, and neither of them mentioned afterward the moment they had gripped each other like the only fixed points in a moving world. Between the worst of the gusts they talked, because there was nothing else to do but hold and wait. She told him without using any names that she had a decision to make that felt like choosing which of two people to disappoint. He told her that he had learned, after Grace, that most decisions people agonized over were really just a fight between what was easy and what was right, and that once you saw it that way, the agonizing usually stopped. "And if both choices are hard," she asked, "then you pick the one you could explain to a 6-year-old without being ashamed," he said. And she went quiet, because she was fairly sure she already knew which choice that was. The storm broke near dawn. They stood together, filthy and exhausted, and watched the first gray light come up through the restored ribs of the roof. Clean lines against a clearing sky, and the timbers held, every one of them. "It's beautiful," Vivian said. "It's honest," Nathan said. "Same thing, mostly." She almost told him then. She almost said, "My name is Vivian Hart, and I could tear this place down with a signature, and I flew here to decide whether to." The words got as far as her throat, but she looked at him, gray with fatigue and quietly proud of a roof, and she could not stand to become, in his eyes, one more person who saw the building as a number. So instead, she said, "Whatever happens, this place doesn't come down. I'll see to it. I promise you that." He smiled the tired, kind smile of a man who has heard strangers promise things before. "That's a nice thing to say," he said. He did not know that she was one of the very few people alive who could actually make it true. The unveiling gala was Frost's idea, a way to show the restored boathouse to a room of investors and impress people who mattered. He had not, of course, invited the carpenter, but Arthur Penn had. Arthur was the owner of Cedar Hollow, 74 years old and not well, a man who had spent a decade of letters and phone calls trying to hire one particular craftsman and had finally, that spring, succeeded. He had been away at treatment for most of the summer. He arrived for the gala in a chair, thin and bright-eyed, and the first thing he asked was where Nathan was. Nathan was, at that moment, standing near the back of a grand hall in his one clean shirt, Poppy's hand in his, because the little girl had wanted to see the lights. He had not meant to be seen, but Frost saw him, and Frost, humiliated that labor was mingling among his investors on his important night, crossed the room with 2 members of the security staff. "I told you to stay invisible," Frost said, low and vicious, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Take the child and get out before you embarrass the people who actually matter here." The room began to turn the way rooms do toward a scene. Poppy pressed into her father's side. Nathan reached down and put a steadying hand on her shoulder and said nothing, because he had decided long ago what kind of man his daughter would watch him be. And then a voice cut clean across the hall. "Before anyone lays a hand on that man," Vivian said, "you should know he's with me." She had come in through the far doors in a dark evening dress, and she did not look tired now, and she did not look like nobody. Every executive in the room seemed to recognize her at the same instant, and a ripple of whispered understanding moved through the tables. Frost's face did a complicated thing. "And you should know exactly who I am," Vivian went on, walking toward them, her heels sharp on the old floor. "I'm Vivian Hart. My company owns the decision about whether Cedar Hollow lives or dies. And for 2 weeks, the manager of this resort has been threatening, insulting, and trying to throw out the one man who saved the reason any of you are standing here." The silence was total, and into it, Arthur Penn pushed his chair forward and slowly, with effort, stood. "Let me finish it," the old man said, his voice thin but carrying. "For 10 years I wrote to the finest heritage craftsman alive, and for 10 years he said no, because he was raising his girl and would not be pulled away. This spring, he finally said yes." He lifted a trembling hand toward the back of the room. "His name is Nathan Brooks. The boathouse you are all drinking your wine beneath tonight is standing because of him. So the next person who calls him the help had better be ready to explain themselves to me." The whole room turned all at once toward the man in the plain shirt and the child at his side. There was a silence, and then, from somewhere near the front, a single pair of hands began to clap, and then another, and then the whole hall was applauding a carpenter who had spent the summer being told to stay out of sight. Nathan did not know what to do with it. He had not built the boathouse for a room. He had built it for the building, and for the old man who loved it, and a little for the daughter watching him work. So he did the only thing that felt honest. He inclined his head once, the way he might thank a stranger who let him merge in traffic, and then he crouched down to Poppy's level, because in that entire glittering room, the only reaction he actually cared about was hers. And Poppy looked at her father and squeezed his hand 3 times, the way they did, and whispered, "I always knew you were the best one here." "I know you did, Pop," he said. "You always did." Across the room, Vivian watched the two of them, the man who had turned down cathedrals for mornings, and the girl who had never once doubted him. And she understood, with a sudden, aching clarity, exactly what she wanted her life to be near. Justice, when it came without cruelty, which was somehow worse for Frost. Arthur did not shout at him. In the quiet after the gala, with Vivian and Nathan present, the old man simply looked at his manager for a long moment and then said, "You spent every day here deciding who mattered and who didn't. A woman who could buy this resort 10 times over. A craftsman I chased for a decade. A little girl. You looked at all of them and saw people beneath you. Turns out you were wrong about every single one." He dismissed Frost that night, and the record of how the man had treated the staff, the small daily cruelties Rosa and the others had never dared report, came out into the light at last. Frost left Cedar Hollow the next morning, and the resort felt lighter by noon. Wexler's play collapsed in a phone call. Vivian took it on the dock the morning after the gala, and she was calm in a way that unsettled the man on the other end. "You wanted me to sell the soul of this place, to look decisive," she told him. "Instead, I saved it. The boathouse is restored. The story is already in 3 papers, and the summer bookings just tripled overnight. Run the numbers again, Gerald. The sentiment you keep sneering at is now the most valuable thing on our balance sheet. Count the reservations, and then tell the board how the divestment looks." She hung up. The board vote, 11 days later, would not go the way Wexler had promised it would. The man Frost had judged to matter least had turned out to be the reason everyone else got to stay. Nathan, for his part, did not gloat. He went back to the water and kept working, because there was still a rail to hang and a set of doors to true, and the building did not care about galas. It was Nathan who insisted they say the true thing out loud. He found Vivian on the dock in the evening 2 days later, and he sat down beside her, and for a while they watched the light go long and gold across the lake. "I have to say this plainly," he said finally, "because I don't know how to be any other way. For 6 weeks I let a whole town believe I was your husband. I let my daughter watch me live inside a story that wasn't real. I don't like who that made me, even a little." He turned to look at her. "So I need to ask, was any of it true? Or was I just the quiet place you hid?" Vivian was quiet for a long moment. "I let the lie stand because being near you was the first honest thing I'd felt in years," she said. "That's the part that doesn't make sense, I know. A false story and a true feeling, sitting right on top of each other." She looked at her hands. "I didn't tell you who I was because I couldn't bear to become a threat to the thing you love. And somewhere in there, holding your ladder in the rain, I stopped pretending to be your wife and just started," she searched for it, "wanting to be near you. That part was never invented." Nathan let out a slow breath. "I spent 6 weeks being a husband I wasn't," he said. "I don't want to spend one more day being something we made up." "Then let's stop making it up," Vivian said. "Let's just be whatever the real version is. Slowly. For real." Behind them, small feet came thumping down the dock. Poppy arrived breathless, holding the little wooden boat, and she did not go to her father. She went to Vivian, and she looked up at her with the whole solemn weight of a 6-year-old's hope, and she asked the question she had been carrying all summer. "Do you think," Poppy said, "that you could live somewhere like this? By a lake?" For the first time, the answer did not feel impossible. Arthur made the offer at the end of the summer on the dock, with the restored boathouse gleaming behind them. "Stay," the old man said simply. "This whole estate is full of things falling quietly apart, and I would rather they be mended slowly by a man who loves them than quickly by one who doesn't. Set your own pace. Set your own price. Bring the girl. This lake has needed a family in it for a very long time." Nathan looked at Poppy, who had already, in her mind, moved in. He looked at the water he had spent a summer learning, and he said yes on his own terms, for the first time in 2 years, accepting work not because it was small enough to fit around his grief, but because it was large enough to build a life inside. "There's a caretaker's house on the North Shore," Arthur said, pleased. 2 bedrooms, a window that faces the sunrise. It has been empty a long time. I think it has been waiting for you, honestly, the same way the boathouse was." Nathan thought about a window that faced the sunrise, and a daughter who would wake up to a lake instead of a rented ceiling, and he found that his eyes stung, and he blamed it on the wind off the water, and Arthur, who was old enough to know better, let him. Poppy, for her part, had already begun planning which room would be hers, and had informed Rosa that she intended to have a garden and possibly a dog, and that she would need help with both. Rosa, wiping her eyes and pretending she was not, promised to teach her everything she knew about tomatoes. Vivian kept coming back. Not as a chief executive escaping a board, and not as a woman hiding under a borrowed name, but as someone who had decided that the thing she had stumbled into was worth the drive. She restored Cedar Hollow rather than selling it, and she stopped pretending that mattering to a very small number of people was somehow beneath a life spent mattering to thousands. On a gold evening in the last week of summer, she stood on the dock beside Nathan, while Poppy launched the little boat again and again into the shallows. "I came here to be no one," Vivian said, "to disappear for a week and then go back and make a decision I hated." She watched the girl chase the boat. "I think I'd rather stay and be someone to the two of you." Nathan reached over and took her hand, and this time no one was watching, and no one had to be told a story, and it was simply true. 3 people and a mended building, and a summer none of them had gone looking for, all of them staying. Weeks later, in the first cool light of an early autumn morning, the boathouse doors stood open to the water, straight and sound and quietly beautiful, ribs holding, roofline true. Poppy ran down to the edge of the dock ahead of them, her boat under her arm, calling something about the color of the fish. Nathan and Vivian followed at an unhurried pace, close together, in no particular rush to be anywhere but here. Neither of them had gone looking for this. He had only been trying to save a building, and she had only been trying to disappear. But some things get built while you are busy holding up something else. And the ones worth keeping are almost never the ones you set out to make.